Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. Ruth is a visiting professor at a large university in Ireland, and Claire is an associate professor at a primarily undergraduate university in Northern California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're talking about opportunities for students to disseminate their research. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was amazing.
Oh.
It was so good because I had a week off.
Oh my goodness.
And it was so, I don't think I've had, so over Christmas was the last period where the university was closed, but I was freaking out about trying to catch up on the whole month I lost to COVID. Mm-hmm. So that was like a whole thing. And then honestly, Christmas is a whole thing. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like another job in itself a bit, like even though it's enjoyable. But this week the girls had midterm break. I'm on this weird schedule with my teaching where I've taught half the course and then I'm going to start teaching again in a couple of weeks, the second half of the course. So I was able to take like 5 days of leave, mm-hmm. and it was just so nice. And I didn't check emails. I did find myself, I automatically replied to an email last Sunday.
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, what am I doing? And but it was, I'm so happy when I'm not working. So I'm like, maybe that's what today's episode should be. When should you quit your job? But it was like, it felt like such a break. Like I haven't, and we went into town on the bus, uh-huh. and, just did stuff without, I don't know. I just feel like normally when I've had a break, it's like, okay, now we got to get our eyes tested and go to the dentist and all of these things. And it was just fun things.
Oh, good.
And it was my birthday in the middle of the week. So that was also
goodness.
Celebratory. Oh, thanks. It was so good. Take time off. I highly recommend it.
You are officially on a leave of absence. It seems like you should be doing this kind of thing.
Yes, totally. So tell me, how was your week?
Oh, my week was good. So I'm doing a research cruise in June, and this is my first...
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, and just button right in there, because you said research cruise a few times, and I have a hard time visualizing. Does it mean you're going on a cruise ship to do research, or is it a research boat? Like, are you going on like a huge...
It's not a huge cruise ship. It's a normal ship. This one is like 250 feet or something, but it's not... it's designed for scientific research.
Okay, so you're not going to be like people are doing tango lessons around you.
No.
Okay.
Although sometimes scientists do go on like barges that are like container ships and like do extra science off the side if you can. But this is like a ship where they have cranes and like things like that you can hold scientific equipment off the side into the ocean to collect samples and stuff like that. And they have, like the crew, there's a captain and a mate and all that, but then there's also crew that are to help with the science on the ship. They know the ship and how to do stuff, and then the scientists who are doing particular stuff come on board.
So cool.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the beginning of Titanic where the guy goes to like research Titanic. That's what I'm imagining in my head. So
yes.
Yeah, don't take that away
Except
from me.
Except we're not going anywhere near icebergs, but yeah.
Yeah, no, don't. Well, yeah, for sure. But that's so cool. How many scientists will be on there? 22
or 23, I think.
Ooh.
Yeah. So this is my first time as a co-chief scientist on a research cruise. So that means that so the other co-chief scientist is the one who got the funding and secured this research cruise, and then we're working together to kind of make it happen. And so last week, we had a pre-cruise meeting with the ship operations people, kind of talking about what we plan to do, what the science we want to do, and how to best do it on the ship, and like where are we going to put this instrument and where are we going to put that. So it was good to, I don't know, it's just really exciting to kind of think about all that.
So how many days do you go for?
We're going for, let's see, well, we're loading the ship on June 1st, and we're unloading the ship on June 17th, and we'll be on the ship the whole time in between.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you have good sea legs.
Yeah, usually I do get seasick right at the beginning, but then I get over it, unless there's like a storm, and then of course it comes back.
Yeah.
And we are specifically researching phenomena where there's wind. So wind comes from the north, and then we get upwelling of deep waters to the surface, which brings all this nutrients, which leads to all this interesting phytoplankton stuff. But that does mean that we're specifically looking for windy places, so it is often a little rough.
Do you go like all the way out in the sea, or are you kind of
not on
up
this
in the
particular cruise?
coastline?
We're kind of focusing on the coast. I have been on cruises where we go like across the South Pacific Ocean or whatever, and so
That
that's
gives me
we're
so
in the
much
middle
anxiety.
of the ocean. It's pretty nice though.
I know, but anything, basically my whole jam is anything where I can't say, okay, like I'm done now, I want to get off. Like that freaks me out. So
Totally.
yeah, but that sounds so cool.
Yeah, so I'm excited.
Wow, okay, very cool.
So, go ahead.
We need to have just an episode that's me interviewing you about.
Yeah, I'm glad
But
to.
where do you keep the tea? How does food work? Like
there's a steward, and they prepare food, and we have tea, and we have coffee. Whoever finishes the coffee pot is supposed to make the next coffee pot, and there's always coffee and tea and all that.
Man, I want to hear all about it. I bet there's gossip too, because there's always like one person who annoys everyone, and it's sort of good for group dynamics. But I'm imagining someone not refilling the coffee and being that person.
Person. That is a funny thing about being at sea too, is you're like always within 250 feet of everybody on the ship, so you just really get to know each other really well. Well, depending on how long the ship is. This one's 250 feet, I think.
Yeah,
anyway.
Okay, sorry. We'll save it for that episode. Yes, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, do you have a quote for us?
I do have a quote for us, and it's a quote from Oppenheimer, who is a famous physicist. And it says, it's down at the end of the quote, and it says, "The physicists have known sin, and this is a knowledge which they cannot lose." And it's very grim, but as he was one of the people who developed the atomic bomb, and then seemed to express, I don't know if it was remorse, but certainly the weightedness of what he had just done, kind of. It is really interesting, like, physics has a lot to do with military applications of things, and it does feel a bit relevant now to kind of, I think, okay, this is a whole side thing, but there used to be a lot more ethics, I think, discussed in physics, and then that kind of left physics, and I think it's an important thing to still have in physics. So,
interesting.
Yeah,
that's a really good point.
Yeah, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And I believe even when they set off, they were testing the atomic bomb, there was some slight probability that they were going to ignite the atmosphere. And it's like, really, should the decision to do that just lie with a couple of people, or how does that work? So, yes, anyway, that feels relevant. But yeah, so tell me so today we're talking about dissemination opportunities for students to share their research. So do you want to start us off with what's working for you?
Sure. Yeah, so let's see. So I've taken a few students, 3 students total, to an international meeting in our field.
Ooh.
And that was great and really good. But it's kind of rare. Like, I don't go to all those meetings, and then how often do I have students who are at a point when they're ready to present at those meetings? So I love that. But the thing that's really working for me is making use of our university's poster session. We have a poster session every year. It's called Idea Fest, and before the pandemic, I just had all my students present a poster pretty much every year, and it was really great for them. They got to interact with other researchers and present their work, and it was, I thought it was like 2 main benefits. The students really got to get a better understanding of the project they're working on, and kind of we find whatever gaps it is that they didn't understand as they're making their poster, and they fill in those gaps, so they really have a good, solid understanding of what their project is. They get to practice talking about it and practice the poster session format. They get to add it to their CV. So I just really like having this local, just at the university poster session that's so easy. They can be at whatever stage they're at in their project. It doesn't have to be finished. They can say, this is where we're at right now and what we're going to do next. And they can print the just walk over in between their classes to present it. So it's very easy to have lots of students do that experience.
For sure, yeah, totally.
So I love that. And I also I felt like it's been a really good way of interacting with other researchers on campus, because they come to my students' posters and I go to their students' posters. We kind of get an idea what we're all working on, and that's been really helpful. So I've just really been enjoying making big use of our university's poster session.
Yes, I definitely definitely agree. And of course, I'm like more mercenary than you are, and I'm like tenure file, man. Big time. But like it's true,
that
right?
benefit,
Like,
but yes, for sure.
but it's I don't know, like I'm sure I would, like with a lot of things, like I have so much confliction about the tenure file, but then one of the good things is it does motivate me to be like, oh, it's this poster session, like yes, we need to do that.
Totally.
And I think I've really found that students are really motivated to do it, because I think both, like you said, it's on their CV, and it's such a good, like prior to that, I tried to have sometimes it's the end of the semester, I want you to present slides telling me about, and it doesn't work in the same way. This really works as gathering information and kind of, I don't know, for me too, whenever I have something to present, you kind of know more than you think you do, or at least you learn more than you think you would. And so I think that's great. Something that really worked for me, I think I told you about this magic person I had in my research group who was amazing. And so I don't know if this is just down to her being amazing, but having a point person who is in charge of rallying everyone put their stuff on the poster was good. And I think, so for this, I'm particularly talking about posters, like, I think they often think it's going to be easier than it is, but also talking to them about things like all the fonts need to be the same sizes and, that whole thing. And having one person who was keeping an eye on that stuff was super helpful.
That's a great idea. I love that idea of having a point person in charge of certain aspects of all the group's posters. That's cool.
Right, and she was like emailing them like everyone should have their stuff up today or blah 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 or whatever. And yeah, so that was super effective. And I think, I mean, she was kind of exceptional, but I think having someone, because that's one thing that is, maybe this is something I should add to my working on, but like who's the first author or that all that kind of business. So in some ways that can be okay, like who's going to be taking the lead on this,
right
and that could be,
I mean, you're talking about, so it seems like she maybe came up with a lot of these ideas, but now that you've seen her do it, maybe you could have, or I could have, anybody could have a point person, like, we talk to this person is in charge, and here are some of the things you'll do as being in charge. You'll email everybody, and then they can put on their CV that they were taking this leadership role in organizing the group's poster things, and it's a great experience all around again.
Yeah, and I think the students seem very aware of how powerful it is to have publications or posters or presentations. So I think mostly I've encountered people are very motivated to do that. So have you, so you've done posters there, and then did your students, when they went to that conference, do oral presentations or?
I haven't had any of my students do oral presentations on their research yet. That would be cool. But no, I haven't had them do that yet. Yeah, they've been involved with papers and they've been involved with posters.
That's plenty. that's a lot. It's so. Did you publish things before you graduated as an undergrad?
I did not. No, not at all.
I never. I mean, it wouldn't have even been remotely on my radar. So yeah.
Yeah, but I did really find, like, as an undergrad, I did do like we had a campus poster session where I was an undergrad too at Bates College, and that was really helpful for me. And we did have like a senior chemistry majors seminar series where we talked about our research in front of our department. That was also really helpful. Both of these were really helpful as like practice talking about my research. And then when I did go off to a conference or something, I was in a much better place to do that, So,
yeah, I think that's so important, because for me, the first time I did anything was a poster presentation at an international conference on my PhD research, and I thought I was going to pass out. Like, it was so stressful. So I think, yeah, having those smaller opportunities. And can I ask, the papers you mentioned, were they in, I don't know how to say this properly, but grown-up journals? Like, are they, do you know what I mean? Or are they...
So far, I've only had one undergrad who was on a grown-up, peer-reviewed professional paper. I'm planning on having some more. I just haven't gotten those finished yet. But I've also had some students. So the Idea Fest local poster session, we also have a local journal, and I've had some students submit to that as well. And I know you've had some already published in that. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, when I was an undergrad, I did a research experience for undergraduates and then came back and did a poster presentation in the American Chemical Society conference. And I remember this was very much a learning experience for me, because I remember my poster, I had it all color-coded. I was analyzing these two different molecules, and I had them, green if it was one molecule and red if it was another molecule. But I don't know if I said anywhere on the poster that's what my system was. Yeah. And one of my fellow interns was like, okay, I understand everyone's poster except for yours, Claire. Explain to me your poster. And I was like, oh, my goodness. So anyway.
That's such great feedback.
It was good feedback. So
I know, but it's like, you're the only one. So, so what are you working on with these dissemination?
Yes. So this semester that we're in right now is the first one back since the pandemic started, where we're planning to have an in-person poster session on campus through this Idea Fest thing. And so I was considering, great, do I want to have all my students present again like I used to? And at first I did hesitate. And the situation is that I really value the work that my students are doing in the lab and really want them to get as far as they can this semester. And it really felt like, I don't know if I want them to stop and make a poster, And so was the benefits, this myriad of benefits we've been talking about to the students of doing this poster session, going to be worth the pause that we had to take with all the work they were doing in the lab? So that was, I really felt like this was like something that I had to choose between.
Right, and I think it's so interesting because I think, there is something to be said for not waiting for the natural point where, you've discovered the new thing or whatever, to just do it, totally what you were saying. But then there is something to be said for waiting a little bit and not just doing it by rote every single year.
Sure.
Just because. And, it sounds like, I don't know if I'm getting this right, but you're really, building things back up again and building momentum. So that might be the most important thing right now. Exactly,
yeah. I have a lot of students back in the lab now for the first time in a while, and they're doing things that I really want them to finish, and they're going to graduate and all that. But you know what I realized is there's a lot of benefits to doing the poster session, and it's not simply, there's the huge number of benefits we already talked about that are benefits to the students as the student experience and all that. Benefits of participating in the community and getting to interact with other people. Those are all huge benefits, but they're not the only benefits. It also helps with the research itself. We get all of our data at whatever point we're at, organized and in one spot. We make sure that we're all working with the most modern data sets. We think through all of our interpretations. Maybe we think of something new as we're designing the poster and just making sure all our thoughts are in order. So I guess I've kind of gone from, I don't know, I feel this conflict of letting them pause to do this poster session, but I want them to continue. And now I'm more thinking, actually, this might be really helpful to make sure that it might be helpful to the research itself, as well as all the other benefits. So I think I'm going to do it. But that's kind of been a thought process I've been working through.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's hard to know. I don't feel like I've done any adult level research, do you know what I mean? But a big thing that I'm feel like I still want my PhD advisor to help is, how do you know when you've done enough to do a paper or whatever, you know what I mean? And so that I really struggle with.
I really think posters help with that. Because, you get it all together and then you're like, oh man, we really do have a little hole right here that we should fill. Or you say, hey, this is kind of a nice cohesive story. Maybe we're almost done. Or I don't know, So that's what so I'm starting to see the poster sessions as a tool for the research rather than merely a dissemination experience and dissemination. Rather than just disseminating the research and being a disseminating opportunity for the students, I'm seeing it as a tool for the research.
That is very true and I think that's a really important framing.
So I hope that it ends up being that way, but I think it could be that way.
That is very cool.
So what are you working on?
I'm working on, one issue. So I've been saying students are really enthusiastic, and I've had a student or two who've been really enthusiastic about the prospect of having something on their CV, but still kind of treat it a bit like a homework assignment, where it's just sort of people kind of go radio silent if they're not working on it or they haven't done it. They stop communicating. Okay. And they're like, oh yeah, I'll get it. I'll do it all the night before and it'll all work out. Or, kind of, I've had a lot of anxiety inducing experiences with students committing to do it,
I see.
then I have to like pull them along, which is not what I want to do. I don't like that's
Right.
I don't like I think it's a great opportunity, but it's definitely not one. I don't see it as part of my like role as an educator to necessarily drag someone through the process.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
That
Like
makes
they have
sense.
to.
Sure.
Yeah, and so I had that situation a couple of times where, so I think a thing I'm doing is like really throwing down when it comes up in the beginning. Like this is what you're committing to. Do you know what I mean? And I think I've tried to limit people trying to do something solo because I think that's a dangerous situation. So I think that like really setting expectations at the beginning. And then I think just getting comfortable in myself with being like, okay, we're pulling the plug on this. Like even if we have to be the people who didn't show up and do the thing, the workload and is not worth it. Do you know what I mean? And then my other thing is sometimes quality control. So
Okay.
I, with one of the journal that we have on campus, so I had a situation with a student and it was like pulling teeth, the situation, and it finally was going to get published, and then COVID happened, and then my life exploded, and the whole review process got dragged out over like, I don't know, a year and a half or something. And I was not as on it with no, change this. And when they came back with the proofs, and anyway, the final product is not something I'm super happy with. And it also has my name on it, you know, and I should have been way more like either just said my life is like on fire right now. So like we're not doing this. Do you know what I mean? Or being way stricter with the student. And I was so frustrated with myself because it was kind of clear from a couple of weeks into it that they weren't going to, like I was pulling them on every step of the way. So I just needed to cut it off way earlier. And so, yeah, but I feel like I really kind of let myself down with the quality control on that one. And like it does matter. And I don't think students necessarily, like I've had students, have you had students where they make the poster and they just have like their name like in big letters on the top, and then you're like, oh yeah, you have to put my name on there too. And they're like, do I? And I'm like, yeah, totally. Because, you know, and so I don't know if they often totally understand, like it isn't a homework assignment in that way. Like there is an accountability. And like, even with the posters, I think they're in some repository somewhere now digitally.
Sure.
And,
it's reflecting on the whole lab group, not just them.
Yeah. And so I do think, my working on is kind of, I'm further along in that process of realizing what I need to do. So I think setting really extreme, that sounds really harsh, but really strict like expectations about like, this is not like, this is above and beyond. Do you know what I mean? And if you're going to do this, you really have to commit to doing it. Like I'm not going to pull you through the whole thing. And then me just getting comfortable with when to pull the plug on something if it's not going to be good quality. And at first I was like, well, it's just our on-campus journal, but it's Googleable. Do you know what I mean? And so it does ultimately matter. So anyway, that's my journey with the quality control issue, I think.
That's really, yeah. I love your thought that actually in retrospect there was a moment early on when you could tell it wasn't going in the direction you wanted it to go. And so what you talk about throwing down all these rules right at the beginning. What kind of expectations do you have in terms of how they contribute or how they make this into a paper?
I think the last time, like I only had this successfully go one time, and again it was mostly because of the student who was involved, who was amazing. But I was just really like, this is an opportunity and you have to decide if you're going to put in the work. Like this is not something like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do it, and you know,
it's a
maybe
big
and then
job because you're gonna have to publish something, but for the whole group. Sorry, I want to hear what you're.
No, that's exactly it. And then like also, you know, because there was another situation that happened where the poster ended up being completely fine, but it was not thanks to two of the people who were on, you know what I mean? And so I think that, like putting that out there really upfront, like you're committing to doing something with your colleagues and you really have to honor that. And if you're not going to do that, you'll just get taken off the post, you know what I mean? And kind of just like, again, I'm saying this, and of course I'm completely saying it in my, hey guys, like, sorry to bother you, but this is really important. So like, I haven't gotten my Snape performance down yet, but yeah, I think it's in the past. Originally I was like, oh, does anyone want to do a poster? Okay, sure. And I think setting it out as a project that's important, and it's representing the group and the university and all of that, like really highlighting how important that is.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I really think, like, I hadn't thought about this until you mentioned it, but it's not, why would it be clear to students that this is different than any other assignment?
Yeah.
It's a research publication, whether it's a poster or a paper that does reflect on everybody whose name's associated with it, which definitely includes the PI and them. And it's out there. It's not the same thing as, oh, you get a B on this thing you dashed out the night before.
Totally.
It's a different category, because now we're in the research category. But of course, they wouldn't know that, so it's good to explain that.
Well, that's interesting, because I definitely, even in the earlier days, had someone who was like, oh, like, I can get this to you next week. And you're like, what are you talking about? The poster session's tomorrow. Like,
right.
There's no, like, yeah, there's no extension option. Like, it's just, it is or it isn't. So, yeah. So I think, have you had, like, snafus with students, or...
Well, what I'm thinking about that's maybe similar is with our local journal, IDFS journal. I did have a group of students who worked on it, and they did a great job. But I did think, in retrospect, I would have asked them for a full, complete draft earlier. Like, they got the full, complete draft by the deadline, and we submitted it, and that's great. But I would have loved to have the full and complete draft 3 weeks before the deadline, so we could really work on fine-tuning and adjusting and all that. And I think I tried to say I want the full complete draft, but I wasn't like, this is the absolute deadline for the full complete draft 3 weeks before the due date. And I think I'll do that next time, because we really want to submit a really nice and polished full and complete draft at the deadline. That's,
ultimately, with that paper, like, there's nothing terrible in it. Like, it's all scientifically sound, but some things are just really sloppy. And if it just wasn't time, but I think I would now recognize that, okay, if it's sloppy, it's not going in. Do you know what I mean? And if you give me this the night before, even though, because I did ask for it the week, whatever. But
I think earlier deadlines, that makes sense.
Have you had to throw down on kind of quality control for posters?
I haven't felt the need to do that on posters. I think maybe with posters, there's a date where you absolutely must send it in for printing before the poster session, and so that's a firm date. But I think this is a good reminder, because I haven't done it in a few years, but I think I have been strict, like, I need a full and complete draft a week before that deadline so we can do edits. So I'm definitely going to do that again this semester, thanks for the reminder. Because, we do need we need that time to edit it.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Cool. This is really good, because it's reminding me that it is really beneficial, but then to really have thought out my expectations.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of my problem too, is like, I was like, sure, okay, this sounds like a good idea, but hadn't really thought about what that actually meant. So,
I think same for me. Yeah.
And there's one thing I was going to say, which I didn't mention, and I've never published in it, but I think NCUR, like the letter NCUR, is apparently a good journal for publishing undergraduate research stuff.
And there's also the American Journal of Undergraduate Research. I believe that's what it's called. We'll put the links in the show notes. But those are good, like, multidisciplinary undergraduate research peer-reviewed places.
Cool. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows, or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.